because man's task is to make the earth after the model of heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Man's project is to heavenize the earth. Man is made to transform the world from glory to glory, to take hold of it and break it down and remake it after the image of heaven.
Now you learned how to do it.
Welcome back to the Reformed
Gang
Reset.
signs, that's how it works.
My name is Grant, and joined with me is my beautiful wife, Ericha, the weaker vessel.
Hello, everyone.
You can tell we're kind of messing around before we recorded. On this episode, we're going to talk about clerical clothing, collars, perhaps vestments a little bit even.
Yep.
You know? But before we jump into that, if you would please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell so you get notified when we release new content. Check out the description below for links to social media, Patreon, merch store. You can email us at takeoldstudios@gmail.com. And if you're in podcast world listening, you can subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review, and that'll help us reach new listeners. So all of that we appreciate greatly, and it helps us a ton.
That's enough of the business.
That definitely. So what?
Okay, so
what
today,
are we talking about, girl?
Today we are talking about why you personally wear a clerical collar, and why in our denomination some choose to wear vestments, whether it be a robe, whether it be clerical collar, stole.
Yep.
Right?
The robe is called an alb a lot of the time.
I'm probably never going to remember that, but I'll do my best.
Yep. And then the stole.
I don't even know how to spell that.
This ALB.
Oh, that's easy.
For all of you out there.
I could remember that.
Alb. Okay.
Okay, so I did a little bit of research.
All right.
I want to say a very
y'all.
little bit. It is a very little bit. It mostly consisted of a Google search and a YouTube search.
Google has all the answers, so.
Sometimes. It has answers, whether they're the right ones or not. We're not exactly sure.
I tell my students that I say, please don't Google answers to these tests. Like, first of all, it may seem like it gave you an answer. It's probably wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you right now.
Yeah. Okay, so this is something that I think is an interesting topic, because unless you
For sure.
grew up in a maybe Lutheran or Presbyterian church, Anglican too, I suppose.
Catholic, perhaps.
You probably are not very familiar with vestments.
Right.
I grew up in an area that is very densely Catholic and Lutheran, so it is very familiar to me. It doesn't seem strange to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said in, my Baptist days that I liked it, but it wouldn't have been weird to see someone wearing that. A vestment.
You wouldn't have looked at it. What are they doing? If you knew who did it, kind of thing.
Right. It was very normal. In certain, that's north, right? So like where I'm from, Midwest North, that is just where.
Well, a lot of German immigration, Lutherans, a lot of Polish, Catholic. So it makes sense.
Italian, right around the Chicago area.
That's true. Italian, Catholic.
Yeah, Irish even. Right? Like that makes sense. In certain regions, less so. Like I think the South is very Baptist.
Well, and I grew up in California. Surf culture, and Calvary Chapel is massive. Although they had vestments, it was a Hawaiian.
That's true.
Button-up shirt.
Every single one of their ministers wore a Hawaiian shirt, and that is almost without exception.
Yeah, you would almost think it was mandatory.
Yeah,
how popular it was.
It's very bizarre. Actually,
I don't know if it still is that way.
So some of this could be more or less comfortable based on where you're from.
Right.
And just based on denominational background and just what you grew up around. That makes total sense. I have also heard a lot of people who came out of the Catholic Church, who were raised in the Catholic Church or Lutheran or Anglican or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe the more like liberal Lutheran or liberal, right?
Okay.
And or like PCUSA or whatever.
Right.
And they tend to have a big problem with it. They don't like it.
Right.
Because to them, they feel like they left a doctrinally unsound denomination or whatever, and they feel like now I'm coming into this new thing and you look just like them. I
Right.
don't like that. That feels uncomfortable that you look like my Catholic priest. Fair enough?
Yeah. That's typically the comment you get is, isn't that Catholic, or that looks Catholic, or it feels Catholic, or something like that. Which is kind of funny, because if I was Anglican or Lutheran, I'd be like, what gives? You know, why do they get all the...
I mean, I don't know. The Catholic Church is the original church, so...
People like blaming them for everything.
Isn't that true?
Everything negative. Blame the Catholics.
Did you hear me?
No, what'd you
Okay,
say?
never mind. That was a joke, everyone. You can hear that later as you edit.
Yeah, I will. I'll be mad I didn't laugh at it.
Okay, so is it true that the Catholics were the first to wear a clerical collar?
Contrary to popular accusation, it was not. It was actually Presbyterians in Scotland who were the first ones to wear a clerical collar.
Okay.
If you go back further, okay, well, let me finish that. Then Anglicans and Catholics stole it from the Presbyterians and used it.
Stole it?
They stole
Is that a
it.
pun?
But that could be. Although I don't know many Presbyterians that wear a stole, except for today, like in our denomination. But
In the PCA, do they?
well, they wear the Geneva gown. That's pretty common.
Okay.
And even Presbyterians in Scotland, and they wear some kind of the Geneva gown, which is much more associated with the academy.
So what is a Geneva gown? Can you describe what that looks like for people who may not know?
It's the big black
Poofy one?
Yeah, kind of like what judges wear.
Okay.
That's much more like that.
Okay.
It is associated with offices of authority and offices or professional offices like judge, minister, college professor, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, but if you go back further in church history, though, vestments were worn by priests or pastors, and we're talking way before the Roman Catholic Church became very corrupt, just to be straightforward. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, guys, I know I'm giving you some church history here, but the Fourth
Grant's favorite thing. You're going to get it.
the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, Pope Innocent III, that was where like everything began to really go downhill. That's when transubstantiation becomes mandatory throughout the Roman Catholic Church. 1215, so just a few hundred years between then and the Reformation. That's when things really started to heat up and go really bad. Prior to that, it's really sporadic. You have maybe kind of a wild card over here, but this guy's faithful, right? Pope Gregory, faithful, great pastor, like
Would you
servant
say
leader.
that would be like equivalent to like the PCA right now? There are good churches, there are bad churches. There
Yeah.
are crazy liberal ones like the Greg Johnsons, and then there are really faithful.
Well, he's not in there anymore. So if someone's
Okay.
PCA, they're going
Well-
to say, wait a minute, he's gone.
Okay, he was.
He was. Yes.
And then there are some really good faithful ones like,
Yeah.
our PCA pastor.
And then there's a lot in the middle that are probably fine,
Sure.
you know? But the Venerable Bede, who wrote a book called The Ecclesiastical History of the British People, or The Ecclesiastical History in Britain, something like that. He talks about how, a bishop in Britain received his, he becomes the bishop, and then the bishop in Rome sends him I can't remember the old Latin term for it now, but it was the specific vestment that he would wear during worship.
Okay.
So we have vestments that go way, 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 way back, like 1,500 years. This is not a new thing. This is not just a Catholic corrupt church thing. This is something that has been done and practiced for a really long time in church history.
Actually, you could even go further back, say, to like the priesthood.
Exactly. And I was going to say,
Okay,
and
did I steal your punchline?
no, it's good. And this should come at no surprise because the early church just adopted some of the similar practices of Old Testament worship. Of course, not all of it. They're not murdering or they're not sacrificing animals, and right.
They're also not murdering. So
They're also not murdering. But worship, of course, has been transformed. But meeting with the king to worship was a very holy and special time. The one leading in worship was marked.
right.
Right. And it's not so much that the clothing makes the minister, or it's like, oh, there's something special in the collar. No. It just marks the man that God has marked. And so specifically for the collar that I wear, it's because God's called me to this job, this mission, this task. And so all that does is it marks what God's done, right?
It identifies you.
Right. It identifies you.
Which is something that you see all throughout the Bible. I think this is harder.
It's true.
I think probably why it's harder for people who are not covenantal to grasp this is because they don't view scripture that way. Where like what happens in the Old Testament still does have bearing on what we do right now.
Yeah.
And we understand that as Presbyterians, right? Like that's why our children are included in the covenant, because we don't just toss out everything in the Old Testament, right?
It has implications now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're not wearing exactly what a priest would have worn. You can definitely, there's a difference.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the priesthood has changed in the new covenant.
Yeah.
Right? That was, the high priest was Aaron. Christ fulfilled that. He's now a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. We are all priests. But the leadership in the church is obviously a specifically ordained person to a specific task, which the priesthood in the Old Testament, same thing. They were chosen by God and ordained to a specific task.
Right.
So there's tons of similarity.
And I think this is actually something that Americans are quite familiar with, whether we want to admit it or not.
Truth.
When you go to a doctor or a hospital, like you can identify who the medical staff is and who isn't based on what they're wearing. It's very easy to tell. It's helpful, actually. When you go to a police station, you know who the police officers are and who is just, they're waiting
Firefighter.
Yeah, they're judges, right?
Yep.
In the judicial system. We do uniforms in America all the time. This is not something that is very foreign to us.
Well, and even Calvary Chapel had a uniform.
Yep.
It's like that. We even do it when we think we're being casual and we're not being Catholic, but actually in principle, you still do the same thing. So be honest with yourself, It
kind of reminds me a lot of people who say they don't like liturgy, but every church has a liturgy. It's just a good liturgy or a bad one.
Right. Or a biblical one or a less than biblical one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, exactly.
And I would even say that in Southern Baptist culture, there is a uniform and it's usually a 3-piece suit.
That's right.
That's typically what is expected a minister to wear.
Right. I find it, kind of funny when it's like, well, we're casual here. And it's like, so shorts and a t-shirt's cool.
Right.
Well, no, of course not. You're going to church, man.
Right.
And it's like, well, I thought we were.
Right. Like, what is this?
Oh, we were casual.
What is the standard that we are appealing to? Well,
Right.
for a pastor, it ought to be like, you ought to think a lot about what it is that you're wearing and why. That is actually an important thing for you to do.
Yeah. And
so when you put on your clerical collar, is it because you just want everyone to distinguish you and because you're prideful and you just want like all this honor and you want people to respect you and that's why you just need to be so distinctive and different? Yes and no?
That is not. What I really want to do is I want to respect and honor what God has done and the calling that he has placed on my life, right? And when I was installed as a pastor, right, I want to respect and honor that and make sure that that's recognized, that is not something that should be taken flippantly or lightly or casually. Like, no, this is very, very special and unique. And it's not some kind of, walking on holy ground. Oh, it's giving due weight to it, I believe.
Well, when you think about like the priesthood, they're job and their role was really important. Yes, that's true. And they deserved honor. Yes, that's true.
Right.
There was some kind of like reverence in a sense that like a due honor for your minister, I think is appropriate.
Yes.
But also there is a weight on that man and a responsibility on that man's shoulders that are much heavier than anyone else in the congregation, right? And you know that because if the priest did something wrong, they could die.
Right.
Because them going before the Lord was weighty. That wasn't just a thing they did flippantly.
Yeah.
And if they did it in an unworthy, bad, wrong way, they could be struck down.
Yeah.
That tells me that job is a little bit more dangerous than the guy who's just tending to the sheep out back.
Yeah. That's good. Very good point, hon. I read something recently and kiddo, go upstairs, buddy. You're good.
I thought I left my camera in my sweatshirt pocket.
Oh, gotcha.
Super scared for a second.
Oh, okay. And
Crisis averted.
we're all good, everyone. But he was saying, funny how we've become a much more statist culture, and nobody has any problems with the robe that the judge wears, but everyone has a problem with the pastor wearing something and thinks that's pretentious. But in our more statist culture, we think, oh, don't say anything about it. We don't say, oh, who's he think he is? And I read that. I said, that's so true, because the French Revolution, Rousseau, and all of this humanist thinking that has corrupted Western culture, one of the main things that they want to do is destroy hierarchy. They want to destroy distinction, right? Kuyper said, modernism will not rest until it has made man woman and woman man. 125 years ago, he said that.
And here we are.
Prophet.
Right.
Put a stole on him, which, by the way, the stole, which is like it just goes over the shoulders and hangs down.
Kind of.
Yeah, and it just hangs down. That is a direct connection to the mantle that Elijah and then Elisha and the prophets bore. And so the pastor, who it is the herald of God's word, who is in a sense prophesying, not in like the capital P prophesy sense, but the ones preaching the word of God, they wear a stole. They're not just speaking any word,
Yeah, it's not their opinion. It's not their like.
It is the oracles of God.
Yeah.
That they are preaching to the people. So I mean the white robe is because the pastor is representing Christ, his word to his people, and then his table. He's administering at the Lord's table, and so that's the symbolism of the white.
So you would wear the
robe.
stole with the white robe.
Typically, yeah.
Would you wear the stole with a Genevan gown?
I've never seen that happen.
Okay.
No, maybe there is a way to do that. Again, we're not getting into the details of all the little the ropes that you for belts and all that stuff, because we're just
That would be a long podcast.
That'd be a long podcast.
It's just interesting for people who are unfamiliar with it. There's just these are not words we know really, right? It's just good to know.
Yeah, so I want to continue on the hierarchy thing, because yes, of course you see it with the transgender movement, right? They're destroying distinctions and ruining that. But our culture more and more has a kind of hostility to any distinction or any authority.
Especially a masculine one.
Yeah. Especially
a godly masculine one.
That's true.
That's the one they hate the most.
I saw a video the other day. It was on a Instagram page that had videos of like Ring doorbells and stuff. And it was this teenager kid walking past a super nice Mercedes SUV. And the teenager picks up a rock or a brick, passes the truck, picks this up, goes back, and just drags it twice across the side of this Mercedes, drops the rock, and just walks off. And I was like, man, I can't believe it and everything. I was thinking, because they're rich, I'm not, I'm going to level you.
Yep.
Right? I'm going to bring you to my level and
Yep.
removed the distinction. Now you're just like me.
Now you don't have the nice thing that I don't have.
Right. They wanted to equalize the scenario. And when I thought about the statist comment that I read earlier, it made me think about all of the, hate or love Trump. But remember when he gathered all of like ministers? How many of them had clerical? I don't remember any, Why didn't he pick somebody who had a symbol of authority? Well, the state doesn't like a rival,
It's interesting because when I am on like social media, like let's just say Instagram, Reels, TikTok, whatever, the people that I often see in vestments are not men. It's usually liberal women.
Oh, that's sad.
Which I think is very interesting. And that it goes right along with what you're saying, right? Because if any kind of distinction is going to be made, it's going to be one that, in their eyes at least, would raise a woman up to a position that makes her equal unto a man, which is just feminism also.
That's true. Yeah. So I think all of that has something to do with it, because if you go to Christian culture prior to 1900s, everyone has vestments on. Every Baptist, every Presbyterian, every Anglican, they might have been different.
I think like every image I've ever seen of George Whitefield, he's wearing vestments.
Yep. Charles Spurgeon.
Yep.
He wore some kind of vestments.
Both of which were Baptist, right?
The Wesleys. Whitefield, I think, was still Anglican or something like
Was
that.
he?
He's
Okay.
a little renegade. George Whitefield.
Okay.
He had a little tough go here and there,
Okay.
But he's fiery,
Yeah.
Spurgeon was obviously for sure Baptist, though.
We know that one. Yep.
I think a famous picture of, part of the separatists, where the 1689 Baptists and the separatists, part of their issue with the Church of England had to do with being forced to wear certain kinds. It wasn't an issue with vestments necessarily, or with the Book of Common Prayer or whatever. It was being forced to this on this day in this way. It was very rigid.
Which we would still have a problem with today. If the federal
100%.
government came in and started, saying this is the prayer that you may pray every Sunday, we would all be appalled by that.
It could be a great prayer.
Sure.
But I would just be mad and I would not do it because this is the wrong person telling me to do this. That's why I have way more sympathy with the Covenanters, even though I think there is a whole lot of value in from the Anglican Church. It was wrong, what they were being forced to do. But anyway, the other thing that I really like about it, and this applies to many things in a high liturgy church, it helps us fight against Gnosticism.
I was going to go there too.
Were you? Yeah.
So what is Gnosticism?
Well, Gnosticism is that creation is just a hindrance to your spiritual well-being and growth. And so the whole goal in life is to kind of deny natural or carnal things or appetites, right? So a lot of the Gnostics are celibate and they fast a lot and they, whatever. Sort
of like denying the physical in order to attain the spiritual.
Yeah, and when you do that, the better you do that, the higher level of gnosis you're going to achieve, and
the more enlightened you become.
Right. And so you see this pop up in Christian culture. It's been a problem in Christianity for its entire existence. It was the number one heresy at the early church. And so
it's still a big problem today, turns out.
Right. And so when you dignify and you see the value in things like clothing and food and celebration and joy and art in a church sanctuary, and some of that stuff is so good to help us remember that God values all of that, and all of it is supposed to be put under the lordship of Christ.
In the CREC, which is our denomination, it is kind of like a 50-50 thing. Like, don't you think maybe 50% of them are pretty close?
Yeah.
Maybe a little.
What do you mean? 50 wear vestments, 50 don't?
Yeah. You think it'd be about that?
I would say maybe a little bit more wear, actually.
You think so?
Maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
60-40?
Yeah. We'll go
we'll go 60-40, guys.
You guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong.
I think a lot of people may not know that because Doug Wilson is very like
Right.
popular. Like he's a big face in the denomination.
Yeah.
And so that he doesn't personally. But like it is very normal and common in our denomination. I think there are a lot of very popular, well-known ministers who do. Rich Lusk, Gary Brito.
Right.
There are pastors in our area.
Garrett Craw, Adam McIntosh.
Harold Guptill.
Yep, Harold Guptill.
We're just gonna start naming everyone.
I know Joe Thacker does. Who else does? All kinds of people.
Yeah.
Dwayne
Probably shouldn't name people on the
They're
podcast.
like, why did you say my name? I listened to your show, but I don't want anybody to know about it.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. They wouldn't care because they do it.
No, love you guys, all of you.
Okay, so it is very normal in our denomination.
And
I
it's
don't
not-
think it's generally a problem.
No, and I think it's important to say that it's not just this like residual thing that still needs to get buffed out. Like, oh, that's still there. Well, one day they'll grow out of that. No, these men have extremely solid. I think Kyperion.com has some really good articles talking about these kinds of things. And
Theopolis has done a few things about this topic.
true.
Blogs and videos and whatnot.
It's a very there's a very deep and strong biblical argument for all of these things, for the liturgical colors, for the seasons of the church calendar, orienting our time according to the fact that Jesus orders our time. Jesus is Lord of time, and so mark our time with the events of his life.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Again, one of those things that the Catholic Church took and then abused when they added saint days and they added this and added that and then required you to, they kind of ruined everything. Almost everything.
Well,
They kept a couple of important things like Doctrine of the Trinity and
thank
stuff.
goodness. Or that'd be a big deal.
I know. So anyway, there you go. That's some of our
That's like the
thoughts on there.
that is I hope that's helpful, honestly.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that if you just don't know, you don't know, which I know sounds really stupid.
Yeah.
But like if you're very new to Reformedom or the Presbyterian world, it just seems weird. I understand that.
Yeah, and I think it's important again to examine yourself and you think, okay, so if I'm hearing about this topic and I say, well, we just prefer, or I just prefer things to be casual. Ask yourself, is that good? That might be good in some contexts, but also, is that always good to just always be as casual as possible? And you know what that reminds me of is last night you were reading Screw Tape Letters to the kids, and that was one of the tactics is, get them to be flippant about things that they should be serious about. And
if ever there's a time to be not casual, I think entering into the presence of the one true king would be the time to elevate things to a pretty high level, right?
yeah,
I mean, and that is why if you look throughout scripture from the beginning to the end, it's God who takes great care in how his priests are clothed in, the old covenant, in the eschaton. Like he cares a lot about how people are clothed.
well, and if it's very normal for you to dress up, and now we're getting into just like dressing nice for church, and we've talked about that before. But if it's very normal to dress up and wear specific things at a wedding, why not at an event where the bride and the groom are meeting?
Right. And that is what's happening, right? And I think we just take church to be casual and we don't actually think through what it means. And when we take time to say, if it was your daughter's wedding, would you come in such a casual manner?
Right.
If you were invited to the Queen of England, she's dead, so maybe don't do that. King of England. The King of England's.
She was queen for a long time.
Yeah, it's going to take a little while to reboot that one. But if you were invited to like a big event at a palace, like, are you going to go dressed like that?
Yeah.
You probably won't. You'd be ashamed to probably come dressed
They may
that
not
way.
let you in.
Yeah, and they may not. Obviously, God is more gracious. But my point being,
Well,
like,
he clothes you with clothes that you can't afford.
That's true too.
So
So it is very costly. It is always costly to come into the presence of the King.
amen. All right. I say we end it there.
Okay.
Until next time, take hold and reorder creation by first reforming your home. This has been the Reformed Reset.
But on the basis of grace and on the finished work of Jesus Christ, the project is back and forth, and the destiny of a new transformed world is assured.
I just put the sourdough in the oven too, so I've got like 40 minutes.